Yeah, g'day everyone. It's that time. Welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winny and Clarkey. We're with you for the next hour or so to preview everything round 21 in the NRL season. Before we get to all that and more, let me welcome in the man that without him, none of this is possible. Winny, how are you going, mate?
Mate, I've been better. I'll get to that, but I want to start with you because Sean Johnson wasn't the only prominent figure of the NRL world to bring a new member into his family. You've done the same yesterday. So on behalf of the whole TryPod family, we've got to say a huge congratulations. Shout out to your wife, baby boy. We are thrilled for you. And no doubt you could be a bit delirious, mate. I know what it's like, but I appreciate you didn't apply for paternity leave. So how are you holding up?
No, I'm ready to go. You're right. I could have put in the paternity leave application, but yeah, my boss here is a bit of an ass anyway. So probably, no, I'm only joking. I tell you what, the only thing more exciting than that is our best bet. So why don't we jump straight into that for our punters? What have you got for us this week?
I won't jump straight in. I want to address the fact that you're not the only one calling me names because we did go, well, we had a three best bet win streak in around 20. We came out of it with the three best bet losing streak. We had a three mixed matchup win streak, came out of it with the losing mixed matchup along with the losing SGM. The only bright spark was your all or nothing challenge, which I'll get you to touch on later. But I just want to talk about the results because I think that a lot of people have a temptation when they're struggling with their tips, especially if people are paying them for the tips, or even if you've got a following and you share for free, you want to guarantee that it's going to turn around. But the most honest thing I can say to everyone right now is that nobody can promise that. And if I'm ever crushing it, and there's certainly been plenty of times where we've had outstanding results, I'm the first to say that can't be sustained. And when I'm struggling, then I actually have to accept that comes with the territory as well. So we've just got to remember it's not that easy. If everyone who knew their footy could just turn a profit week over week, month over month, punting on the NRL, everyone would. And I do understand the TryPod has kind of made betting look easy at times over the years. But the truth of the matter is it's not. And it's a double-edged sword because of our outstanding results that has led to, a lot of people following us. A lot of people use this as a resource. So when I fail, I feel that I know I'm letting a lot of people down. But the facts are we're 20 weeks in. Overall, we're down less than 1 unit on BBs and mixed matchups combined, up 10 units or a little more on multis. And it is part of our responsibility, whether we're going great or going badly, to show how to bet responsibly and how to deal with the frustration, the disappointment that comes at times. So we're going to continue to demonstrate that. I'm still confident and I've still got a few plays I want to share tonight. And most importantly, I'll share why I like them. And then you guys can decide if you like them as well.
Sounds great, mate. Hey, have you got those best bets up ready for us to go?
I do. So I have 5 to play. So again, have a listen to me. I'll try and make it as clear. I'll go in depth why I like each and every one when we get to those games, but I'll try and share super briefly at the top of the show, as I always do. Firstly, either team 1 to 12, Warriors, Raiders. So my biggest reason, while I respect the Warriors, I'm betting they won't win 13 plus on Friday against Canberra. It's 4th versus 5th. The Raiders are off the bye. There is revenge factor for the Raiders. They do get back some key forwards. $1.87 on 365 is the best price for that. I think final style game and it will be tight. Whereas later Friday night, as much as it'll be a cracking game in South's Broncos, I am going to lay the 3.5 with South Sydney $1.90 just because I believe they are superior. Everyone is rested for Souths. They've come off a bye, but also getting some key troops back from injury. Could there be a degree of rust, perhaps? But it's such an important game for South's top 4 prospects. I'll get into that I think they're just going to be dialed in. And you give me that list at full strength. Mind you, Brisbane's still got a couple out. I know there's a lot of key inclusions for Brisbane. A lot of people will like them, but I still think that Souths are a try or more better. Understanding that game's on a neutral venue as well, if anything favours Brisbane, I still can't go past South Sydney. The following day, I'm going the Roosters again. My best way to play them against your Titans at Seabus is race to 20 because I'm certain there'll be points in that game Saturday Arvo on that fast deck. $1.90 on Sportsbet is Roosters race to 20. I do think with Teddy coming back while Tino is out, that the Roosters have got a point to prove, much maligned in the last week or really all season. And this could be one of those games where they They just want to make a stand, even if the season is beyond them. I like the Knights later on Saturday night against the Storm. I'm going to play a mechanical +10. So it's 8.5 most places, but you can play +9.5 on Ladbrokes, $1.95, and you'd put 43% of your stake. The remaining 57% of your stake you'd have on +11.5, which is $1.75, also Ladbrokes and Neds, and that achieves money back if they lose by 10 or 11. And finally, I'm going Penrith Panthers, who host the Bulldogs on Sunday afternoon to score over 6.5 tries. Do I really need to explain any more other than all the stars are back and Canterbury are a bit of a basket case? That's $1.82 on Lads and Neds. So a bit to unpack there, but 5 plays that I like each and every one of them.
Yeah, I like them all too. There's nothing really there that jumps out at me as a bad play. I love them all. And I'll add Mike Clarkey's all or nothing challenge to part of this best bet segment. So if you guys aren't tracking, about 2 weeks ago, we come up with an idea of if we average around a certain amount per week, can we get from $10 to $1,000 by grand final night? So we started off in the first week. I went Sharks -9.5 Raiders head-to-head. We won that. We won again last week on the Broncos and Panthers head-to-head. And I'm going to keep it simple again this week. I'm just going to go Storm and Sharks head-to-head. I'll get into the reasons exactly why later. But our current kitty bag sits at $27.02. And you can get $1.84 for Sharks and Storm head-to-head on Better. And fingers crossed those two sides come through and we can continue our climb up to 1K by grand final night. But that's our bets. So let's get into the footy action and, of course, talk the bets specifically in each game.
Mate, can I rock the boat as well? I want to actually throw Tristan's clip in next just because he did touch on how the bookies went last round and then he looks forward to this round. Maybe, I know we would have thrown it in later, but maybe we just listen to him off the top, if that's all right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
G'day everyone, it's Tristan Merlihan here from Top Sport, and it was an eventful week that had just gone. A couple of the big moves were on the back of the Storm, so the Storm minus, which obviously covered. That was one of our worst results of the week. It was compounded by the fact we laid the overs, and obviously the 2 late tries to the Chooks sent the totals over. The Warriors were a massive go as well. They were back from underdogs into favouritism, and they won very, very comfortably. So that was an ordinary outcome. And then the ugly result from our end was the Panthers against the Dolphins, where obviously a number of the Panthers players were rested and the Dolphins were supported at the plus. So that one, Penrith jumped out to a nice big lead, but couldn't quite capitalise. A couple other good results. So the Cowboys Manly game, that one fortunately for us fell on the split. We laid quite a big bet on the plus on Manly, and also a 13 plus bet on the Cowboys. So that fell nicely in the little slot, which got a little bit back in what was a pretty ordinary weekend. We had a lot of multis running into the Eels head to head, and a lot on the minus. So we broke square on the game, but that was the result. We needed the Titans to get the result late to get us out of the hole. It wasn't to be. The Titans seem to be playing offside roulette at the moment, which is a bit disappointing, but we'll see what happens this weekend. We got all the players back on deck, so it's a little bit easier to price the games this weekend, but we got one of those ugly lines, the Panthers Bulldogs, where it's gone from 24.5 out to 28.5. They're never fun to price. We've had a big go already where the Cowboys have been absolutely smashed against the Eels. That game's gone from 3.5 out to 7.5. Obviously, some suspensions on the back of that. There's a lot of finals implications on both of these, on a number of these games coming up on the weekend. We've got the Warriors Canberra game, which obviously has some top 4 implications. From our perspective, we've got a bit of a stand on the Eels to make the top 8 of the ones that are in that sort of borderline position. So it's a pretty important game for us if the Cowboys can get the result there against them. They're sort of both projected to run 8th and 9th, and then in the top 4, our biggest position in this market at the moment is the Rabbitohs, where they're just sitting outside the top 4. So obviously they've got a lot of players out. They've got an important game. If they have any chance of pushing into the top 4, they need to beat the Broncos this weekend, and then the whole draw seems to open up. So looking forward to the weekend coming up. There's plenty of high quality games, and hope you back a winner.
Yeah, thanks to Tristan for his exclusive insight there on that clip. He spoke a lot about implications, Winnie, top 4 implications, final implications. Now, when we talk premiership implications, there's none greater than this game here. I can't even keep a straight face. It's the Dragons v Tigers at Wynn Stadium, Wollongong. The line is set at -3.5 in the Dragons' favour. They have Tyrell Sloan, Jack Bird, Ben Hunt, and Jacob Liddell all returning. Ben Murdoch-Masila is out, so Dan Russell, the third oldest ever NRL debutant, gets a second chance there. For the Tigers, Norfoluma, Laurie, and De Silva all return for them. How are you seeing this one, mate? For me, this is a really tough one to tip.
And you may joke about what's at stake here. We do have two of the poorest teams in the comp playing, a night game, free to air. Everyone's going to be watching it. But I got to admit, I'm really excited about this because it is a meaningful game. It's the Spoon Bowl. And look, would I rather watch more highly skilled teams play? Sure, but give me a contest, something on the line. That's all I really can ask for. And I do believe both sides come into this desperate to avoid defeat, which at this time of year, you can't always say that about the sides that are in this portion of the ladder. So you mentioned the Dragons getting a host of key players back. They're also off that bye and at home, whereas the Tigers, look, they got Coruscant back last game, and that was a bit of a topsy-turvy, I think 14-point loss in the end in Newcastle. But there were some signs there from the Tigers. I've got to look at the last couple of Tigers games and don't know if they deserve to lose by such a big score to Sharks or last week. They've swapped Dane Laurie into the halves over Will Smith, as you said. Wests have also been in the news this week, again, for all the wrong reasons, again, whereas it feels like the Dragons are a bit more stable, a bit more quiet. Maybe that's just because they didn't play in round 20, so they just weren't in the headlines. As for this match, I must admit I'm really split because on one hand, look, the Dragons are favourites. You've got to make them favourite. They are at home. They're rested off a bye. You get these important players back. So I knew when I looked at it, I'm not betting against the Dragons. And then when I kind of dive into the matchup, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, to me, the Tigers have the better team. I think the back fives are pretty evenly matched. Now, you give the clear edge in the halves to the Dragons, but the forward packs, for me, when you factor in Appy in there, I really like the Tigers along with the bench rotation. So, a simplistic view is maybe Hunt's the best player on the field, maybe the difference. But if the Tigers play up to their ability, and they're very motivated to do so, I would say, because they will basically win the spoon if they lose this, I think they could pull the upset. I don't know if others are going to be picking the upset. I imagine most people will side with the Dragons. But I'm staying off it because I can make a case either direction. I will just say, as much of a sicko as it might make me, I'm really looking forward to it.
It's one of those games where it's not going to be super high level, but it is going to be a contest. And I guess with respect to the Bulldogs game that's coming up this round, you'd probably rather watch a contest like this, even at a lower quality, than you would a side most likely get pummeled, right?
100%.
And so I look at this game and I want to tip Dragons. But because I'm struggling to come up with reasons why I should tip either side, and just based on form this year, we've probably got more reasons not to tip either side, I'm just going to flip that tip and I'm going to go the Tigers. I don't trust myself because I don't know how to pick this one. So I'm actually going to go against myself. I can't tell you why. I'd like to make something up and look like a genius as to why I've got a bold tip. The only thing I've got is John Bateman in the media this week. He seems really confident. Apparently, he's told all the boys that this is pretty much, if we lose this, we are getting the wooden spoon. I'm not a loser. And this is a guy that's broke his last 3 contracts from clubs. So important game, a really important game, you could argue, for that reason. The plus 3.5 line is too short for me to take the Tigers there. I did consider a plus 12.5 into the all or nothing challenge, but I just can't risk it with the Tigers. If they play to their potential and they extend their periods of which they play good, that represents some good value there, although short into a multi. But you just can't guarantee it with the Tigers. It's just too risky for me. But the Dragons, they have conceded an average of 34 points and they've lost their last 3 straight at Wynn Stadium. So although you could say they've got the home ground advantage, certainly in their recent games, they've been poor in Wollongong. So I've got Tigers, but don't bet the house on it. That's all I can
just
say.
to address some comments, mate, Clarkey's Rugby League, are you typing comments while you're on the show?
Yeah.
Or have we got an imposter? Are you okay?
Yeah.
All right, just wanted to double check. And I wanted to address Luke's comment. I love that there. Imagine if the NRL had relegation, then would be extra spicy. This would actually be such an epic game. I don't know. Clark, you got a bit of influence. Can you pull any strings? Like, I don't know who's next cab off the rank. North Sydney Bears into the comp for the wooden spoon getters this season. You know how exciting that would be. You got to admit that would be bloody exciting.
It would be amazing. The only issue I have is that the Sydney Roosters are currently aligned with the North Sydney Bears. So whilst they, look like they're ready with their roster, a lot of those players would go back to the Roosters. I think one day the sport will get there. especially with people like V'landys and audacious administrators in charge. But right now, I don't think we're quite ready for promotion relegation system as cool as it would be. And because you can imagine, this stadium would literally be packed out with fans of either side, knowing the importance. But maybe one day, and I think it'll be awesome if we get there. Friday night, we've got the Warriors v Raiders in Auckland, New Zealand. The line is set at -7.5 in the Warriors' favour. Marata Niokore returns for them, as does Bunty R4. Josh Curran and Bailey Sirinen make way. For the Raiders, 3 big inclusions. Pasami Saulo, Josh Papali'i, and Corey Horsburgh all make their returns. Now, we were both on the Raiders last time this game played. That was the one here in Canberra. Are you going that way again, or are you leaning more to the Warriors this time?
That's it. Hey, rematch of the ill-fated Crocus 300th game. That was only 6 weeks ago, and you don't need to bring that game up. It's seared into my memory. In case anyone else has forgotten, I took the Raiders as a best bet. They were -4.5, and I said at the time I rated them the better team, and they did lead at halftime, but I think they lost the second half something like 28-4, so they were kind of routed in the end. And now I can't sit in front of people and say I think the Raiders are the better team, because since then, the Warriors had one dud performance. It might have been the next game. We know they lost at home to Souths, but the last 2 weeks, New Zealand, demolished a depleted Eels, if you want to take something away from that win. But then they just smashed a full-strength Sharks. That got everyone's attention on Sunday. And I was against the Warriors there too. So, of course, they've got my attention as much as anyone, and I've lifted my rating and opinion of New Zealand accordingly. But as for the Raiders, well, they were so poor in that second half against New Zealand, they have rebounded to produce 3 straight wins since then. And what you could, if you wanted to pick holes or pick nits in the Raiders, I suppose, they never seem to win convincingly. So it's been 3 narrow wins in the last 3 games, but that's just been the story of the Raiders season. The Warriors look at home as well in this game. I think the line should be probably around 6 points. I can understand it being a converted try. You mentioned the key players, key forwards are back for both sides. And I said at the top, 4th versus 5th, it's a quality game. And my first instinct was, do I dare to go against New Zealand again? I've already copped it enough this year when I've gone against New Zealand. And more often than not, I've been wrong. So deservingly so. And I kind of am going against New Zealand here, but it's an either team 1-12. So I'll be incredulous if New Zealand lose this 13 plus at home, because then everyone giving me grief for, oh, you've got to respect the Warriors and stuff. They better not do that to me. So I'm counting on New Zealand's gone way too good this year to lose 13 plus. And I figure either 1-12, I'm kind of getting plus 12.5 on the Raiders. And the Raiders are a strong team, as I said before, off a bye. And I just think that Canberra's underrated because they haven't showed as much of their potential as what they can compared to New Zealand. I think we have seen everything New Zealand's capable of this year. And I've got to admit, it goes beyond the players they put out on the park. There's an incredible cohesion and spirit that you kind of have to factor into the line. But I do think that a fresh side that also wants to seek some revenge can combat that. And I think this is going to be a really high-quality, entertaining game. So I am going 1-12 because I give the Raiders even a chance at the upset, just not 13 plus.
I'll tell you what, we'll cross live now to our weatherman with the forecast, Luke Burrow there on YouTube. Now, I double-checked that while you were speaking. It is scheduled to rain on Friday in New Zealand. So that definitely brings it tighter, as you wouldn't expect too much expansive play. I tipped Raiders last time these two sides met, mainly for the occasion of Croker's 300th. I did sort of preface it that I'm really keen on the Warriors, but I just think Croker's 300 will be a bit too much of an occasion. It wasn't. So I have to respect the Warriors this time, especially because now they're at home where we know they're building a really good record. It's strange because you go back to the start of the year, Winnie, and all my Warriors tips, there was the one against Cowboys early in the season. It was a gut feeling or it was a bold prediction. Now you can just tip the Warriors and it makes sense. And I really love that because, New Zealand's a side that still don't, in my opinion, don't get the respect for what they did to keep the game going. So it's they're just a great tip, and it's really, really good to see. They have scored the most points of any NRL side, in the past 5 weeks. And Raiders are typically a side that's been winning by low margins this year. Their win over the Dragons, it was a 10-point win. That was their largest all season. So you are right. If they go out and win 13 plus, oh God, that would be very, very, very unlucky. But I'm going to go New Zealand in this one. Raiders are tough. They won't go away. So I'll go Warriors 1-12. I think they'll get through the game pretty comfortably. I think the Green Machine will be thereabouts, but always just behind the class of the Warriors. And then I'm tipping Sean Johnson for another maximum point Dally-M game. Continue his rise there. Where it becomes interesting, Winnie, if the Warriors win this, they will go into the top 4 based on points differential, most likely. If Sharks were to get a huge win, they could leapfrog them, but that game there absolutely has top 4 implications. Friday night, primetime game. We've got a rematch, Bunnies v Broncos, this time in Queensland again, but on the Sunshine Coast. The line is set at -3.5 in the Bunnies' favour. They will have huge returns. Latrell, Graham, Jai Arrow, Jacob Host, as well as all their Origin reps who were rested last round. For the Broncos, some big inclusions as well. Carrigan returns from being rested, as does Reece Walsh and Payne Haas. You're going the Bunnies in this one. I like the Bunnies in this one. Maybe a little chance to tell us why.
Yes, and this, of course, ties into who's going to make the 4. Massive implications in this one. Tristan touched on it as well. So, Skep Dial, is it? Asked, do I think Storm will make the 4? Luke saying Waz to make the 4. So, I'll kind of get into that because I will discuss the candidates as I go game by game. This one's in my backyard, but I still couldn't get a ticket. I'm working on that. I'd love to get along to this one and see, two sides absolutely have kind of grand final credentials. I think the 2 that have the biggest chance of stopping a three-peat this year. So it is important we both noted that. The scheduling gods, again, we've referenced it many times. They've looked kindly on Brisbane this season. You've got an away game to Souths, yet Brisbane catches a bus to it and Souths have got to fly. You mentioned all those inclusions for South Sydney. It's eye-popping, extra eye-popping because they're not all back from injury, of course. That includes the players that are returning from Origin. But that is why this week I did tip Souths at $2.80 in our group, Facebook and Discord, to make the top 4. So South Sydney currently sits 8, but I feel like this is the right moment to buy low where all these key players are coming back. There's a reason that they are so low on the ladder because they lost all those guys in the middle of the year for one reason or another, whether it be injury or representative or a bit of both. Now the band is well and truly back together. And I believe, I said these 2 are the best 2 kind of challengers or contenders, but I do think Souths are clearly the second best team in the comp, and the market agrees because they're making Souths a favourite even on Queensland soil. But I go as far as to say, like, obviously people knew I was going to tip Souths tonight because I tipped them, to make the 4 earlier this week, and so I would not have done that if I thought Souths would lose. Whether or not I played them for a best bet, I really had to be convinced myself that Souths are clearly the stronger side. And I know that Brisbane looked great last week. I know Capewell came back. And I also know there would be a concern with Souths might not be in top gear because you get a lot of players back. Are they all top match fitness? Is there a bit of rust? But what it comes down to for me is the importance. And I don't want to get too nerdy on people. I said in the group, I crunched the numbers and have them about a 40% chance of winning 5 of their final 6, which is what it'll take to make the 4. So because of that, Souths could lose this and then win the final 5 in a row and still make the top 4. But much more likely is Souths need to win this game to finish top 4. And can you really win the comp from outside the 4? I know this year we could have some good teams outside the 4, but it's so much harder to truly win the comp. Remind me, Clark, have we ever seen it? We haven't, have we?
No, we've had to make the grand final, the Cowboys in 2017. Cowboys, they didn't get the Eels 2009, but they just get thumped in the grand final.
Right. So we know the importance. And getting back to just the maths, basically, if Souths win, there'll be a better than 50% chance of making the 4. If they lose, it's like a 1 in 6. It's like a 15% chance. So just give me this rested side. They're off a bye. They're completely full strength. Let's not forget Brisbane still got no Flegler, no Ricky. Comment there about Adam Reynolds has an injury scare on his wrist. So I'm not factoring that in, but it would be a massive bonus for us. Hey, back to the Roosters last week and lost Teddy. Could I go against Brisbane and lose Adam Reynolds? I mean, it only seems fair to me, but not thinking that way. But it'll be a caution if you liked Brisbane in this one. You'd want to know. Whereas, I come into this game, Latrell, he's not firing all cylinders necessarily every game, but I feel like he doesn't have to be 100%. He can be a little bit of a decoy. He threatens without the ball. What I do know is Walker's nearly untouchable. You talked to me in the recap about form players in the comp. We should have mentioned Cody Walker, Cam Murray as well. I think he cancels out Carrigan. I believe I said suggested the same thing for Origin 3. And I see it in a similar light too. I think the New South Wales side is stronger in this one. I do think South Sydney wins by a try or more in a high-quality footy showcase on the Sunshine Coast.
And I did a contenders graph earlier this week, and I had South as a fringe contender, and people weren't happy. They were saying, how can you have them as fringe? But it's just for the fact they are currently in 8th. But I do have a bit of a bold take that if they win this game and look good doing it, I don't think they lose another game this season. I think they absolutely hit finals. And I know they've mixed their form this year, but I go back to this 3-game stretch where they were full strength. It was rounds 8 to 10. They beat the Panthers. They then beat the Broncos. They then beat the Storm. That's a magnificent, those 3 there were my prime contenders, actually. I had the Panthers, Broncos, and Storm as my prime contenders. So the fact they were able to do that just shows what they are when they're full strength. I think the Rabbitohs will be a little bit more desperate here. Broncos are well entrenched in the top 4 at the moment, so I'm not saying they'll come in comfortable, but certainly the Rabbitohs at 8th know they need to win this game, right? And so in Queensland, they beat them at Suncorp 32-6. That was in round 9. Both sides have continued to trend in an upwards direction, you would say. If not for Bunnies, you could mention they've been unlucky due to their injuries. Bunnies are 4 from 4 at Sunshine Coast Stadium, but Broncos have been really good on the road this year. They've won 8 from 9. So I do think this will be a tight one, but I'm going to say Rabbitohs here, and I'm going to tip Alex Johnston to score. If he does get that try, Winnie, he will move to outright 3rd behind Slater and Ken Irvine on the all-time try leaderboard. I've got that graphic ready in my Google Drive. That's how confident I am. But don't forget for this game as well, every week we'll be cooking up a same-game multi thanks to Better. Our Better sign-up link is in the show description here live, and if you are listening as a podcast. And of course, if you do sign up, make sure to message the TryPod page on Facebook. But before you jump on any bookie, think, is this a bet you really want to place? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website. That information is also in the show description if you are listening as a podcast. And looking forward to that same game multi too there, Winnie. It's going to be there's a lot of potential in how you can build that one out with 2 great sides like that. Let's move on to Super Saturday, though. It opens with the Gold Coast Titans v Sydney Roosters. We're at Seabus Super Stadium on the Gold Coast. The line is set at -3.5 in the Roosters' favour. For the Titans, Tino Fa'asuamala-Aui is out, so Isaac Liu moves to prop, Aaron Clark to lock. Stimson returns via the bench, where Jaden Campbell joins him also, as AJ Brimson is back at fullback. For the Roosters, Teddy returns, Manu to centre, Suali'i to the wing, Jake Turpin to hooker, Brandon Smith via the bench. I will hand over to you and mute my mic because you can probably hear my daughter crying in the background. My apologies, everyone.
You're right. We understand. She probably doesn't want to hear what I've got to say about this game anyway. I know the whole household are staunch Titans fans. And look, I backed the Roosters on the weekend, and I'm not going to say I had the right side. They let in 30 straight points, 24 straight points at one stage. But I mentioned already, Teddy was a surprise withdrawal, did us no favours. And had you watched the game, you would have to agree with me. The Roosters should have led it by 2 tries, if not more, at the start of the second half. Could have been a different game, perhaps. Of course, as I said in the recap, I'm not going to say that the inability to take opportunities like the Roosters, suffered from is bad luck, because that's been symptomatic of the Roosters' whole season. So this is their issue. So I was kind of thinking you can't play Roosters here because that's the dream crusher. That was the season on the line. But then I started to hear interviews, like I heard Brandon Smith talking about we just have to win every remaining game, so they kind of feel like they're not eliminated yet. So maybe this is the final all-in. You don't want to keep back in the Roosters waiting for that great performance. But I mentioned Brandon Smith. He hadn't played for 2 months. He played last week. Arrested Teddy comes in, and he's copped a lot of criticism and scrutiny, especially all year really, but especially in the last few days. They're saying, how could you captain, leave at a time in a game like that? He's going to want to come in and prove the naysayers wrong, as he kind of did for Origin 3. And what gets me over the line and why I am going to take the Roosters here, and again, my best bet is race to 20 at $1.90 on Sportsbet, is, sorry, Clarkey, but I do feel like it's a decent spot to fade your Titans. Again, I know I paid the price with that one last week, but I stand by that tip against Parramatta. If we don't, get Parramatta reduced to 11 on 13 at a critical stage, maybe Parra covers that line. But I've been really impressed by how the Titans have fought to the death the last couple of weeks, but it's hard when you've had back-to-back heartbreakers and, dare I say, back-breaking defeats. And now you lose your captain as well. I think that another, overall thought I have about this game is that it's a Saturday afternoon. It's on the fast deck at Seabus. I just don't know if either team's going to be highly motivated defensively, but I do think that the Chooks come out with a point to prove and will want to turn it on. And, whether the desperation's there for the entire game, I'm not sure. But I feel like the winner of this game is definitely going to be in the 20s, if not both. So I felt like I'll play the Chooks and to score plenty of points. And so I went race to 20.
I like Ryan's theory in the comments. He says Titans coming off of 2 tough losses, mentally good spot to fade them. I like that, Ryan. It's 3 difficult losses. The Raiders one was equally as tough because I felt like that was there for us to win. And then the field goal stuff the following 2 weeks. This is a tough one for me to break down. My official tip's always different. I have my own Gold Coast Titans podcast where I'm a little bit more optimistic and talking of our chances. On this one, there's betting implications involved and, potentially people's tips, whatever it might be. And so I've got to give my confidence rating. It's probably below 50%, if I'm absolutely honest. We lack leadership already. You take Tino out of this side and the only really leader we've got left is Kieran Foran. Now, he did have a good game last time. He required to step up, but you know what I mean? This is about as do or die as it gets at both sides as far as finals is concerned. But I do think that if that narrative suited either side, it would be the Roosters. They're a side that would definitely have more belief after the Titans losing 3 really tough ones in a row that no doubt it enters the mind. If we just won 1, if we had won 2, we were so close. And ultimately, the Roosters have won their last 9 straight over us. They're a very good, they're like the Sharkies. They're a very good team usually against bottom 8 competition, which we have been largely for the bulk of those games. And we've not beaten them at home since 2016. So we're talking 7 years since we last beat them on the Goldie. The only positive I've got for us is it is David Feeder's 100th NRL game. I hope that motivates our team. I hope Kieran Foran steps up as a leader and sets him up on the outside for a try in his 100th. They have a big game together. But that's all hopes, right, and optimistic. And so if I have to give an official tip using my head, not being silly about it, I would say Roosters win here. I probably think they win 1-12. And I'd be inclined to think they probably can cover that line as well, particularly if they're at their best. There's this narrative around Teddy, and he's playing so poor this year, and he's really fallen off a cliff. Realistically, there's only been 2 games where he hasn't had a try or a try assist. He's averaging about 6 or 7 tackle breaks per game and 182 running meters. Now, Jareem Buller, who is the best find of the year and he's an amazing rookie, his stats aren't that good. Do you know what I mean? So there is this expectation attached to Teddy, but if we compare him to the rest of the competition, he's not traveling that bad. He's just not at his absolute peak elite form. Maybe not fair to compare him to a rookie, but you get the gist there. But yeah,
maybe it's a bit like my best bet record always gets compared to what TryPod's done in the past. So when you set a high standard, then you get held to that, for better or worse. And look, one thing I get a lot of, I always get a lot of feedback, and certainly after, I bet losers here or there, people always say things like, oh, I never understood your bet there, or you got that bet wrong for reasons X, Y, Z. And I always think, well, no harm done, no problem, because you knew that you had the winner. But what I never shy away from is kind of people disagreeing. So I think there's a couple comments even coming through. I just want to address some of the comments. I just question mentally if they will be able to get up and the coach is able to get them up. Liu is a downgrade, but your point is valid. Roosters, Justin said, that was Liam. Justin says Roosters have only hit 20 twice since April. So that's true for sure. The shortcoming of this side's been their inability to find points. I think this would be one of their strongest attacking lineups they've been able to field in quite a while. And again, you've got to factor in the opponent. No disrespect, Clarkey, but Titans in a day game, how many times have they kept an opponent under 20? Matt says Roosters after a season-ending defeat, hard to trust. And I guess that's why I went the direction of scoring points as opposed to necessarily margin or keeping the opponent down. Colt says we, in brackets, he's also a Titans fan, Clarkey, we are going well without winning. We need a change of luck. And a twist of fate says, this isn't the Roosters team we're used to. They've lost too much talent. Cost them finals. The Titans are scrappy. I reckon they get them. I got the Titans at the line. JK even says injured player theory, as in will the Titans lift with Tino out? But Ryan is with me. He mentioned that point, and you echoed that the tough losses. And the point I take out of that too is every one of those Titans games, and as you said, it goes back at least 3. They went down to the final siren. That takes a toll mentally and physically, and it will catch up with the Titans at some point. You can say at home here against an opponent that's had their measure, Titans could get up for it. It is a challenging one, but I wanted to get in on this game, looking at what I still think the Roosters are capable of. I'm going to play them, as I said, in the race to 20.
Yeah, Roosters are only averaging 16 points per game, but Titans have leaked a whopping 433 points this year. That is the fourth worst, in the competition right now. So, yeah, unfortunately, mate, it sucks to say, but I probably am with you with your tip there, and I probably do think Roosters will pip us if I have to. Gun to the head, if I've got to give a tip, I think they'll get us. Next, we've got the Knights v Storm at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. The line is now at 8.5. There has been some movement. It was 9.5 early today. It's moved in minus 8.5 in Melbourne's favour there. So for the Knights, they've got Dane Gagai back. No changes to the Storm. This one looms as an interesting one, Winnie. I think this will either be a tie one or a blowout, and I'm not too sure which way it'll go. How do you see it?
Oh, I see it as the former. I think it will be a tight one. I was looking back at the Knights. You can look back at that month of the year where the Knights drew 32-all with Manly. They beat the Warriors. They lost 16-15 to Penrith. They had them beaten, and Ponga wasn't even part of the team for any of those. Then they lost 18-16 in North Queensland. That loss doesn't look too shabby either. And when you really look closely at those games, the Knights were leading in the second half in all of them and had big chances to win them all. So maybe I can't say Newcastle's in their best form of the year, but because recently they've just dispatched the Dogs and Tigers, which anyone could do. But how about we say Newcastle looks as good right now as they have in attack in many years. The Knights have just put on 100 points in the last couple of games. They come up against a Storm side that's been a bit of a brick wall. They certainly were against the Roosters, keeping the Roosters out and scrambling well when the Roosters were making line breaks. In fact, look at the Storm's recent games. I think ever since they had 45 put on them by the Cowboys, they've been so impressive defensively, except for just a few minutes against Penrith in a game where I believe the Storm players heard that the pod was on unders and just couldn't let that happen, and so had to suddenly let in an avalanche of tries. You take out a few minutes against Penrith, Storm have been a bloody hard side to break down. We know all about the skill and the spine positions for the Storm, but I'm also looking at Nelson is wreaking havoc on a right edge, and then Loiero and King, they're kind of young, up-and-coming players really coming into their own. It's an important game for the Storm as well. They've got their sights set on top 4. There was a question earlier, do I think the Storm will make the top 4? I've got to say, when I tipped Souths, Melbourne would be the side I see dropping out. But I tipped Souths at 280. It doesn't mean I think the Souths are a certainty to make the 4. I understand Melbourne should be favourites to make the 4 right now, given where they are on the ladder versus South Sydney. But I just think it's a lot closer. We'll see, especially after this round. I think there's a chance it could go perfectly in our favour. And I'm talking about Souths winning on Friday and then a potential upset, which I think is possible in this game. I'm not going to tip the out-and-out upset, but I definitely think the Knights are going to cover the line. Again, my best bet is a +10 mechanical. The Knights are walking a tightrope in terms of they need to probably win out to make the finals, or if they were to drop one, they'd need a result or two to go their way. But look, as far as they're concerned, 1-2 in a row, they're at home. Gagai comes back in. The back line's humming. There's no reason not to throw everything at the Storm. In fact, I'm always looking at teams that could be a little low on petrol at this time of year. You can't say that about Newcastle when the last 3 weeks have been a training run against the Dogs, a bye, and then a pretty comfortable win against West. So all in all, it's a simple handicap for me. I don't think the Storm are way, way better than the Knights. And then I factor in the fact that the Knights are full strength, where the Storm, they're still a few weeks away from having Pappy maybe. And there's just an opportunity to pour it all out against Melbourne at home. then I was trying to think, how do I play this? I definitely considered the first half line, but I've gone the full game line because I think even if the Knights were down, they've showed they've got points in them where they could chase as well and fight back. So I think this is another really entertaining game, genuine chance of an upset, and that's why I had to take the start.
Here's where I'm a little bit concerned for the Knights in this game. I compare it to the Sharkies. Now, the Sharkies had the big wins over Dragons and Tigers. They then come up against the top 4 opposition in Warriors and got a little bit of a reality check. I do wonder if the Knights are in for the same. Yeah, 66-point win over the Bulldogs is great, and a 34-18 win over the Tigers is great. But is that going to happen against the Melbourne Storm? I don't think so. You mentioned their stretch. I calculated it while you were talking. Without that Panthers game, since they lost to the Cowboys, they have averaged 9.5 points against them per game. So very, very, very good defensive stats, you would say there. And Knights have worked well to restore that home record this year. They're 5 from 7. But this game gives me Penrith Panthers vibes where they might be in it. They'll be close enough, but it's probably just a bridge too far against the elite of the competition. I look at Kalen Ponga. He's had 6 try assists in his past 2 games. And the Storm just have this way where they seem to always shut down the opposition's best player. I don't expect Kalen Ponga to have the most impact that he could have here. And he's actually 0-7 against the Storm in his career. He's never beaten them. They've always found a way to shut him down. These sides have played only 2 times in the past 2 years. And Storm's collective record in those 2 games is 98-6. 98-6, that's the collective score from the last 2 times these sides have met. You add to that, the Storm have beaten the Knights 11 straight. That's going back about 5 years there. And I just think that the Knights' best ability is their tackle break ability and Kalen Ponga. I think the Storm will shut down Kalen Ponga. And as far as tackle break ability is going, the Storm have shown they have really great goal line scramble defense where they've missed a bunch of tackles but found a way to come through. So I have to tip Storm here. I also think they will cover that line, but I hope they don't. Best case scenario for us here, right, is Storm winning, but by like 8 points. So we get our best bet and we get our all or nothing challenge.
That's right. Although, yeah, now I'm behind the all or nothing challenge, which you've picked, and you've gone Storm, and there's definitely plenty of room to thread. It's not really threading a needle there. We just anything like you said. Storm 1-9 is fine. Question there: is Storm top 4 possible? Look, it's certainly possible. It's like $1.65 right now, and I think it deserves to be odds on. And Melbourne are currently 3rd on the ladder, right? Can they win the comp? I'd have to say I've got Melbourne probably the 4th or 5th best side. But I did mention Pappenhausen before. That is a bit of an X factor. There's still time. I'm skeptical, but could he come back and boost his side? It is possible. And anyone that ends up in the top 4 has a real opportunity. Now, just one more note about the Storm. Sorry if you are a Melbourne fan, because I will be taking them on for my mixed matchup this week. And it's going to be a familiar matchup. Roosters versus Storm. Where have we heard that one before? Oh, well, it took place on the field last week, and it didn't work out too well for me. But I like it even more this week when they're not playing each other. And I just need the Roosters to outscore the Storm. And that's $2.50 odds. You can have up to 150 on that on Toppy. Our promo code's TP Live. Why? Because the Roosters play the Titans. Again, not a defense known for holding oppositions out all day. No Tino. And then I've got the Storm, who are playing against a fully motivated, full strength Newcastle, who are at home, who I've got as a best bet. So it makes a lot of sense for me to build in those 2 games, which will be one after the other on Saturday there. $2.50 odds is a pretty solid price as well, I think.
Yeah, great to see the mixed matchup back-to-back. Adds a little bit of spice to that Super Saturday. Love it, mate. Let's jump into the 7:30 game. We've got Cowboys v Eels. We're up in Townsville at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. The line is set at -7.5 in the Cowboys' favour. No changes to their lineup. For the Eels, they're without Regan Campbell-Gillard, so Offa Hickey Ogden moves to prop. Sevo headed to the judiciary and failed, so he'll be ruled out. I don't know if we know who will come in for him on the wing, but it would be either Wonga Blake or Hayes Dunster. I think it'd be Hayes Dunster because Wonga Blake's on his way out. How are you going in this one? Was there a best bet for the Cowboys in this one? I can't quite remember.
No, because that line had moved. So whenever I see Cowboys Eels, I straight away just think, man, how close were the Cowboys to the grand final last year? They had the Eels on the brink. if not for letting Parramatta come back from at least 8 or 10 point deficit, with RCG scoring a double, which ended what was such a great season for the Cowboys in despair. And at least the Cowboys don't have to worry about Reg in this one. As you mentioned, he's suspended for that moment of insanity against the Titans. Likewise, Sivo is out as well. And the Cows come in as one of the hottest teams in the whole NRL. And I mean, I think the Cowboys might be better than Melbourne. But when you talk about who's better and talking about who's got a greater chance, of winning the comp, they're not necessarily the same thing. So, Brisbane's so much higher on the ladder, you might say they're a better chance of winning the comp than Souths, but not necessarily as good. And same thing for Cowboys versus Melbourne, I'd say. The Cowboys are a lot better than your typical 9th place team, but they're finally hitting that form that a lot of us expected a lot earlier this season. And so I would probably be on the Cowboys in this one if the line was a little bit lower, like it was on Sunday night when actually Nicole, a great friend of the show and man who shares a lot of tips in the TryPod group and Discord, he shared North Queensland minus 3.5 at $1.90. And you knew at that point that Sivo and RCG were in high likelihood going to be suspended. So if that line was available tonight, clearly I'd be on board. I'm going to remind people again, Dylan Brown is still out. I think this is his last week out. And RZ did play for the Cowboys for what it's worth. But look, I don't think the Eels will be easy beats. I've seen a couple of comments of people who boldly actually predicting the Eels. I dare say, I suspect they could be Parramatta fans. But I am not getting in front of this Cowboys side with the serious momentum they've got. I think North Queensland will get a bit of payback for last year's prelim at this venue. Round 13 as well, the Eels were victorious over the Cowboys back when the Cows were struggling. So not much more I need to say about this one. I think the Cowboys, begrudgingly the line's probably moved too far to be a great bet in my eyes, but I would only be looking to North Queensland in this one.
I'm the same. I'm looking to North Queensland in this one. Both sides realistically in pretty good form. They actually played in round 13. The Eels lost that game. From that point, they've gone on and improved their season. They've actually only lost one game since. That was the Warriors one with a lot of their side missing. For the Cowboys, they've not lost at all since the last time these two teams played. In that time, they've had wins over the Rabbitohs, Panthers, and Storm, which I would class all as pretty high up on the contender chart this year. So I favour the Cowboys for that reason. They also have that home advantage, and they've won their last 5 in a row at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. It's a happy hunting ground. It's also Jake Granville's 200th NRL game. I think him and Jason Taumalolo would be the only ones remaining from that 2015 premiership winning side, which is a great occasion for the club. He's re-signed this week. And if they win this game, they actually will leap over the Eels into the top 8. The last time these two sides played in Townsville, I had a note regarding that. You mentioned it, wild game. And not only a tight one, but probably one where the Eels got away with a little bit from the referee, including that forward pass, which led to a try. So Cowboys, we've seen what they can do this year when they want revenge. You don't have to remind Tigers fans at all. I've got Cowboys in a tight one. I think they're traveling just a little bit better.
Kyle Felt, I suppose, would have been in that team, but he's kind of been displaced from the starting 13 for the Cows. Justin says 7.5 points for equal rated teams load up on the Eels, but I would push back and say, are you calling the Eels equal to the Cowboys with no RCG, Sivo, or Dylan Brown? Like, to me, the Cowboys are clearly the better team. You factor home advantage and that revenge as well, and I think this line is justified. But appreciate that thought there. We do still have a tip to share, and this is going to be courtesy of the man who we said already gave us or gave people who are members of the group minus 3.5, which they had the opportunity to jump onto. But how about a try scorer tip from Nicole? Let's tee that one up.
Hey guys, it's Nicole from Wiki. What you see over here is our odds comparison tool. It's really hard to find a pick for this week. If you want to check out the free version of this tool, our punters preview and everything else for Wiki, just Google Wiki Linktree, by the way. But I've settled on Penasini, so the right centre on Mitch Moses' side for the Eels. Obviously a gun player. He's $4.75 on better anytime try scorer and $31 for first try scorer on Double, which I absolutely love both prices. And our punters preview over here, I've got picks for all 8 games, and I do my write-up on game day. Good luck, guys. Gamble responsibly. Enjoy the games.
Great stuff there from Nicole. Handing out a little bit of gold, just like you did in the group earlier. We love it, mate. Sunday, 2 p.m. This one is... That's the biggest line we've had all year, I believe. It's the Panthers v Bulldogs at Bluebet Stadium in Penrith. I feel so sorry for the Dogs here. minus 28.5 line for the Panthers. That is because Nathan Cleary returns, as does all of their Origin reps. For the Bulldogs, they're without Toby Sexton, so Kyle Flanagan goes to halfback. Kickout is named in their extended bench. He could come in on game day, and there is media reporting that he will come in against his former side, so one to watch there. But I don't think it'll make too much of a difference to the outcome in this one. Who are you tipping, mate? Go ahead and shock the world.
Yeah, nobody's going to be shocked by my tip. In fact, similarly, this is a game you could have benefited from being in the TryPod group or Discord. And a shout out another one of our beloved members. It was the Undertaker who shared minus 22.5 about Penrith. And that was, I want to say Monday, So it's like same information that was known then that's known now. If anything, probably the kick-out news works against that. And yet the line is still a converted try greater. And when a line's moved that much, there's a difference between a line moving on information. I'll give you an example. A week ago, Penrith were 15.5-point favourites. The Finns weren't necessarily a great bet of plus 15.5. But once the news came out that all the Origin players and Cleary were going to be sitting out, it dropped 5 points. But 10.5, in my view, was a really good bet. So even though you would have missed the best line, it's okay if there's a bunch of information that comes in that's in your favour. I'm not just saying 10.5 was a great bet because it covered. In the end, I only covered by half a point. But I just thought, losing 4 or 5 key weapons should be worth more than that. And now all these guys are back in for Penrith, and there's going to be no upset this weekend, Clark. I mean, the only upset will be the upset Dogs fans. I'm so impressed by Penrith, I've got to say. You win the comp back-to-back years. You lose stars each season. I've touched on that before. You start the year slow. But here we are. You're first on the ladder, and they haven't had to compensate. Or that's not the right word I'm looking for. But they haven't had to push too hard either. They've been able to rest key players on multiple occasions to keep the attrition down ahead of another finals campaign. So just so perfectly positioned. You mentioned for the Dogs, Addo-Carr and Kickout in the reserves. I feel like it'd be so stupid to risk either of them. What have you got to gain? But if Kickout was to play, all I could suggest would be just give him a run in a game that doesn't matter too much. Let him play whatever, play a couple of 20-minute bursts or whatever, just to get some Ks in the legs, pretty much, do some tackling practice, because he's not going to help you win the game, and it would be crazy to push him too hard and to risk an injury. You've invested too much. The word I was looking for before was Penrith hasn't had to compromise their chances of winning 3 in a row. So they come back home here fully strength, and I do mention the fact that it's at home because Penrith hasn't played full strength at home since the game Cleary did his hamstring. And that game was actually a lot closer against the Dogs. They really haven't flexed their muscles at home since, I think, round 9, where they smashed the Roosters. And if they can smash the Roosters by 40+, I imagine they could do the same to the Dogs. I could lay the points. The best line right now, you've got 28.5 on the screen, 26.5 still available on Sportsbet. But I just think in a daytime game, maybe the Dogs have 1 or 2 moments in them in attack, as we did see them score 20 against Brisbane. So I just like the Panthers' chances of scoring because the Dogs have got no toughness about them. And I went over 6.5 tries in case they play it safe with Cleary's kicking. Maybe Critter keeps the kicking duties. They're pretty interchangeable bets, but I went over 6.5 tries. You probably got to score over 6.5 tries to score over 36 points anyway, I figure, whereas you can score 7 tries and end up with 36 or less. Realistically, I think Penrith scores 40+.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. I think the Bulldogs will have a moment or two in this game through Matt Burton. He always seems to play well against his former side. But certainly the only compromise in this will be the Bulldogs' defense. Largest line of the season, and for good reason. Panthers are always brilliant at home, whereas Bulldogs have actually only won 2 games outside of home games this year. Tough to convince me or anyone that they're going to come to Penrith and break that, where the Panthers are 32 out of 35 recently at home. They rarely lose there, and if they do, it's to do with the wet weather. For 2 of those 3 losses anyway, it was literally torrential rain. Panthers have beaten them by at least 12 points in the past 5 games. So certainly 13 plus looms likely. Probably not too much value, and I haven't even looked, to be fair. Bulldogs have conceded more in their last 5 games than Penrith have conceded the whole season. So again, when we look at this, not only from an attacking perspective, when we put in the defensive stats, doesn't get pretty. You guys know I love a milestone game. It's Nathan Cleary's 150th game. I'm going to tip him for MVP in his return with at least 4 try involvements. I think he could score and have 3 try assists or something crazy there. I think Panthers by 30. This is against the Dogs side that lost by 66-0 only 2 games ago, realistically. And I don't need to say those stats again. We'll move on for the sake of Doggies fans. It's going to be a really tough game. Sunday, 4 p.m, Sharks v Manly. We're at PointsBet Stadium in Sydney. The line is set at -8.5 in the Sharkies' favour. Teague Wilton is out for them, so Jesse Cole-Kewen moves to back row. Dale Finucane returns. Interesting one here. Connor Tracy into the centres. Sio Sifa Talakai to the bench. Moylan dropped. Braden Trindle, their new 5'8". For Manly, Matt Lodge makes his club debut via the bench, and Sean Keppie joins him there also. Now, how do you go for this one? Because, the question is immediately, do you think Manly are a finals-bound side? And if you do, that fundamentally shifts your tip, I suppose. But if not, we know the Sharkies' record against bottom 8 sides, right?
That's it. So I look at Cronulla. This is a team that's been kicked pillar to post this week, rightfully so. You imagine not many punters would be keen on the Sharks, although the prevailing narrative is loud and clear. The Sharks can't beat anyone in the top 8. But Manly are not a top 8 side. So therefore, we could see the flat track bullies take out their embarrassment on the smaller kid in the playground. And most likely that happens. The Sharks are at home here, and they probably are too good to receive that amount of criticism and not respond to it. I said on the recap, firstly, that Cronulla was so poor, and I understand that as well as anyone, because not only did I think they'd make a game of it in New Zealand, I tipped them to win that game. So I was ultra disappointed, but I think I'm also one to say Cronulla's not actually as bad as everyone's making it out. Like when I said they're frauds, I meant in terms of being a true contender, but not frauds as in masquerading as a top 8 side. I think they are a top 8 level side. When you beat the below average sides consistently and often by big margins, it does still count for something. So I would not be surprised if Cronulla does that this weekend, but Wilton's a big loss. You've got a whole new left edge, isn't it? Coolhorn, Trindle, and Tracy defending together. So Olakuatu, DC, that's the side DC attacks. You know that they're going to want to test them out. But then again, Cronulla should probably have a response because Fitzy has wielded the axe and showed that no one's safe. So I'm off this game because I've got reasons I could back either side. Like I could take the Sharks off the embarrassment, but I could also make a case that 8.5 points for Manly, who are not complete deadbeats either and still have, some talented players and a bit about them as well. It's extra difficult because you've got to guess Manly's motivation. Are they kind of all out and are they flat after, if you consider the Cowboys game with season on the line? But I think there's a bit of rivalry between these sides. It is, Sunday Arvo. It is the Channel 9 game. There's enough reasons why Manly could be up for this. And I won't tip it, but I will hope that we can sit back. Hopefully by this point, we've done well in our 5 best bets and I can sit back and enjoy a good game to cap round 21.
I agree with you in the complexity in dropping a tip here. I'm going to say Sharks, and I'm going to go Sharks, but there is some concern in this game. For me, it's a gut feel as to why I've thrown the Sharks into my all or nothing, which could be dangerous, but that has got me a lot of my tips this year as well. You go back to round 12 for Manly. They thump the Raiders. They then drop a game to the Knights. They come back and thump the Dolphins. So we think, okay, Manly are here. They look good now. They then lose by 30 points to the Eels, and then they lose to 18 points by the Storm. They then get a narrow, tight victory over the Roosters, and you think, okay, well, Roosters probably aren't traveling that well. Then they lose to the Cowboys in what loomed as a do or die. And so the point I make there is the Seagulls are a side that way back in round 12, I remember sitting on the show, I'm ready to put a line through them, but they just get that occasional win every now and then. But I just wonder, how long can that last? It's so inconsistent where it's up, down, up, down. Eventually, you come to terms that we're not quite a final side this year. would probably, be making up the numbers even if we get there. And so it's the mental motivation there. Whereas for the Sharks, every single thing this week in the media was negative. And I do think they're a side that can really galvanise off that and come out and have a really strong performance. So that's what I want them to do. Are Manly a top 8 side? Do I think they'll be a top 8 side? No, I don't. So then I've got to tip the Sharks with a home advantage. Only one bottom 8 side has actually beaten the Sharks this year, and Manly have only won 2 of their 7 away games. They've really struggled away from Four Pines Park. So I think the Sharkies' motivation will go to a new level in this one, not only for the media side of things, Winnie, but also the personal side for the players. Trindle has a point to prove. He's been brought in from Moylan, as does Tracy, who's been brought in over Talakai. Talakai's not gone completely. He's going to come off the bench and want to prove something. And so I do think that there's individual motivation as well as team motivation in this, which should really get them up for it. Sharks have won 4 of their past 5 against Manly, including earlier this year in round 11 at Manly's home ground. So you put all that together, I've got Sharkies. Gun to the head, I probably would take them with that line as well. I'd favour them with that line. But great way to finish the round, no doubt about it. Just to recap my tips, Winnie, I'm going Tigers, Warriors, Rabbitohs, Roosters, Storm, Cowboys, Panthers, and Sharks. Were there any ones we disagreed on this week?
I think the Knights could give you a bit of a scare, but I think I'm with you on all the head-to-head picks.
Yeah, beautiful. Of course, the head-to-head pick's always easier when you throw in that line. That's where it starts to get complex and difficult. But we are wrapped up for the show here, guys. We want to say thank you very much for being with us for our Round 21 NRL preview. And, of course, we'll be back Sunday around the same time, 6:30 p.m. to recap all of the action. So from myself, thank you very much. And over to you, Winnie, to say farewell.
Yes, thank you, mate. I hope you can get a few hours sleep here and there over the next few days, but enjoy, this special time as well. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. I actually saw a lot of positivity around my tips and people that are optimistic, as am I, with every best bet. But when you're in a rut, you still need a little luck. You do need a bounce here or there. It'd be crazy to say, that luck plays no part. So hopefully a couple of things can go our way this weekend, get us back on track. And, of course, you don't have to agree with me either. So feel free to drop in the comments, reasons why you might be against any of the best bets. I'm happy to hear that as well. I wish everyone best of luck for whatever they are jumping on, whether it's my tips or your own. And as Clarkey said, we will see you on Sundays. Have a great kind of rest of the week and weekend. We'll catch you then. Lego.